everyone, Jen Smith here. I am your host on this Elevate and Thrive Breaking Barriers for an Empowered Life podcast. This is my very first episode. I am super excited to have you with me. Today, I am going to share my story. I have quite a few of them. I've been through a lot of ups and downs in life, as I know a lot of people have. This is my story of a period in my life that I was completely stripped of everything that I knew and forced to let go of almost everything that I had. This period of life is one of probably hitting one of my lowest of lows, being the most depressed I've ever been. Also, learning how to pick myself up and come out the other side stronger, happier, a better person because of all the experiences that I've gone through. My marriage of 14 years ended. I had to say goodbye to animals that I loved. I had to move from my house. My grandma passed away. I had to sell 95% of my stuff. My daughter had to move out on her own. At the time, she was 23. Eventually, my son was forced to move out on his own. During that time, he was 17 and in his last year of high school. I was in a car accident that totaled my Jeep and caused injuries not only to my back, but also my son had injuries because he was in the car with me. My dad passed away. I had legal battles during this time. I had to close my marketing business because of COVID and the world literally shutting down. It was a time of just complete and utter what I felt like was loss. And during this time, I felt like I had zero control over anything that was happening to me. And just when I thought that I made it through the worst thing and, barely get off the ground, something else would happen that would knock me down again. During this time leading up to this, I would walk around with a smile on my face, just trying to make sure everybody around me was happy. But when this series of events happened, I felt like I didn't have anything left in me to give. I lost friends that I cared about during this time. I have never felt more alone than I did during that period of life. On top of that, there were so many things circulating in our little town that were not true about me. I felt very misunderstood. I felt like things that were being said were, well, I knew they were just completely not true. Because of this, people started to question my integrity, which is everything to me. That is something that is like my guiding compass. So to have that in question was really, really hard for me. And all of this took its toll on me mentally. It just seemed like nothing was going right. It seemed like all I could do was brace myself for the next big blow that was coming my way. Going back to the event that started this series of events, it was that decision to end the marriage. This was a really long period of time of both of us being really unhappy, and on my own side of things, feeling really numb inside. I had gotten to the point where I just lost hope that things could get better. And although we had created this beautiful life together, we lived in a beautiful home. We had this little ranch down in the Southern California area. We had this beautiful life with animals. I was doing my marketing business. The kids were doing really well. There was this underlying numbness, I think, as far as both of us go. And as the days went on, it was like no matter how hard we tried to ignore it and push on, both of us just kept getting more and more unhappy. Financially, things got really tough for us. That was also taking its toll on both of our stress levels. And it just got to a point where neither one of us could continue the way that we were. The decision was made. And so after that, I had a month to basically sell everything that we had, that we lived in a almost 3,000 square foot house at the time. We had accumulated a lifetime of stuff. We had all of these animals. I was kind of left holding all of this responsibility of clearing out the house, selling the stuff, moving the animals. Thankfully, during this time, I had a friend who had an animal rescue who had space for me and my son. And although that situation didn't necessarily end the best, I am forever grateful to her for opening her home to me, my animals, and my son, because at the time I had no other options. Ended up renting out 2 bedrooms from her, and then I had my horses there. And thankfully, she had room for my dogs and my cats as well, and my chickens and my tortoise. It was a lot. And like I said, I'm forever thankful for her allowing me that space in her home. I hit rock bottom. I was so depressed. I was exhausted. During this time, it was shortly after I had moved in with her, COVID happened, and the world had come to a stop. And so during this time period, I had clients for my marketing business. Everybody pulled out all at the same time because everybody was so unsure. They didn't want to spend money on marketing when they didn't know what was happening in the world. A lot of people, businesses were put on halt. People pulled their budgets, and this completely and entirely impacted my financial situation as well. And so now I'm at a point where I have moved out of my home. I'm living in somebody else's house, kind of under their rules. My business is now completely at a standstill. My finances are now also at a standstill. I know that there's a lot of people that can probably relate to that during COVID. If you're a business owner, you might have experienced something similar. And it was really a challenging time, not only for me, but for a lot of people. And I really just want to acknowledge that. What ended up happening is I kept having things come up about being a coach. And this is something that people had told me throughout my life that I would be really good at. Throughout all of this hard things that were happening, universe was sending me a little sign of like, hey, go this direction, go this direction. I ignored it. That's something that I, looking back on a lot of things that have caused me a lot of pain in my life, I realized that if I would have just listened right away, it could have saved me a lot of heartache. It kept coming up, kept coming up. And so I decided to just let go of what I thought should be happening. At that time, I thought I should hang on to the marketing business. I thought I should just kind of wait out the COVID situation, that everything would be fine. And as we know, COVID wasn't just a 1 or 2 month thing, which I think that's what everybody was thinking when it first came. Because the world was shut down, I decided to just focus on my self development. And so I put my head down. I dived into the coaching and the training and the certifications for that. I was so, so blessed to have other people who were doing the same cross my path. And so during this period of time, my light at the end of my really dark tunnel was this beautiful group of people that was also following this coaching avenue and learning how to be coaches. And so we ended up practicing on each other. We ended up really being a support system through this time period that was so hard for so many people. Well, as this was going on, one of my animals, my horse, had passed very suddenly and very tragically. There were friendships and relationships that were really important to me, and I really cared a lot about these people that were just kind of disintegrating, and we were going in different directions. There was a lot of turmoil in my home life with the living situation. My son was forced to move out of that living situation and go out on his own. But thankfully, before that happened, he was able to finish high school. And this was really tough for my son as well because COVID had affected his life. He couldn't go in person, so everything was virtually. He went from being a straight A student to almost failing and not being able to graduate, but he did. My dad, I found out, had passed away, so I wasn't really close to him growing up. He left when I was really little, but we had communication throughout my life. And the way that I found out that he had passed was actually through a court letter that I had received. That was also a really, really hard thing to wrap my brain around because there was a lot of unfinished business there. I felt between me and my dad. And so to know that I couldn't ever have closure to some of the things that I wished I could have was also really, really hard for me emotionally. But then what happened was there was a legal battle that ensued with some of the family members involved in that situation. It was just like thing after thing. I was in a car accident. So, anybody that knows me knows I love adventures. I love to travel. I love camping. At the time, I had a Jeep, and that was like the one material thing that I had left that I really cared about. There was a day where I was driving down the road with my son, and this vehicle just came out of nowhere and ran into the side of my Jeep. My son had some injuries from that. I had some injuries from that. My Jeep was totaled. They actually thought that I could be paralyzed from the accident. So there was that component of it. I went to urgent care and they ended up sending me to the emergency room. I was in a neck brace. So there was this moment of like, oh my gosh, I might not be able to walk. If I look the wrong direction or do the wrong thing or move the wrong way, that could change not only my entire life on a physical level, but how I operate in life. So that was really a heavy time in life. Thankfully, that wasn't the case. I truly believe that there were angels looking out for me. And also, I believe that if we were not in a Jeep and if we were in any other vehicle, we would have been hurt a lot worse and it could have been a lot worse. All of these things that were happening during this time period were horrible and they were heavy. But when I look back on it, I can see how in every single event, there was somebody, something. I call it the universe. That's how I think of the higher power. That's how I think of God. The universe was protecting me in ways that I needed to be protected and also protecting my kids. Even though these heavy things were happening, there was always this presence and this knowing of things are going to be okay. I just don't know how. And I accredit being able to think about things in that way to all of the personal development that I had done up to the point of my marriage ending. And also, I think this kind of contributed to my marriage ending in a way, which is kind of ironic. But, when you go down this path of personal development and really looking inward of who you are and really exploring that instead of looking externally, it starts you on this journey. And it was a journey that I didn't even realize that I was on. So I take a lot of responsibility in that, and not in the way of a bad thing, but just acknowledging that sometimes, as hard as it is, we outgrow situations and we outgrow people that we love. And it's not a question of love. It's just that your path is heading in a different direction. Letting go of those situations was not my strong point. This is something that, if I could say there was one lesson throughout all of this that I learned, it was how to let go of trying to control things. The irony of all of these things that kept happening was the universe would send me something. It's like, okay, you got to let go. And I would just be holding on with all of my might, not wanting to let it go. And the harder I tried to hold on, the worse things got. I am just lost. I'm just like, I'm not knowing what to do. The tensions were growing in my personal life, in my living situation. Friendships that I had were kind of dissolving, and people that I really cared about, I was really needing them during this time, and I felt like they just weren't there. And so I felt really, really alone. The next thing that happened in this series of events was, because of growing tension. I ended up almost homeless and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was trying to find another place to live. At the time, I had, like I said, a lot of animals, and I had found a place for my horses to keep them safe. But I had two dogs. One of them was a pitty and two cats. I was looking for apartments in the area that I could afford. Nobody would take me and my amount of animals, first of all, but also it was really hard to find a place that would rent to me having a pitty. And what's really unfortunate about that is that she was the most loving, amazing soul. She just radiated love. She was amazing. And so it was just unfortunate, but I was not willing to give up my animals. This created a huge problem for me because I got to the point where I did not have a place to go. And it was like, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find some place to take me and my animals. So I had the idea, what if I get an RV? It was the only thing that I could come up with that would allow me to be able to keep my two dogs and my cats. And that way, nobody could tell me what I can and can't have in my RV. And I could also go wherever I wanted to go. There was just one problem. I didn't have a vehicle. I mentioned that in my past life leading up to this point, we had this beautiful house and we drove beautiful cars and we had all this stuff. But unfortunately, what comes along with that is a lot of debt. And my credit was shot. And so now I'm without a vehicle. I decided, you know what? I am just going to try to get a truck. I truly believe that the universe sent some angels my way to help me with the situation because somehow I was able to finance a truck during this period of COVID when not many people were working or a lot of people were working from home. And it was the exact truck that I needed to be able to pull an RV. I end up finding an RV in Iowa. It was the exact one that I wanted. Thankfully, my mom helped me out with that situation. She was kind of my saving grace in that. I went out to Iowa to go pick up this RV in this truck that I had had for 2 weeks. And the crazy things that happened on that trip is like a whole nother story in itself. It was like thing after thing after thing kept going wrong. I ended up getting stuck in Iowa for 2.5 weeks. But again, all of these things had a purpose because when I was in Iowa, my truck ended up not being able to, although it was the truck that I needed to be able to pull the RV, there were some things about the truck that wouldn't allow that. So I had to get that fixed. It was in November that I went to go pick up this RV. Anybody that knows the Midwest knows that during this period of time, pretty much from October on, the weather can turn on an instant. You can be 70 degrees one day, and then the next day you could have snow. So I was staying at a state park during this time, trying to get everything fixed, trying to get everything handled. During this time, I'm still continuing on my training for my coaching. I'm doing all these classes. What ended up happening was me getting stuck there was a blessing in disguise. I ended up getting closure with my ex-husband, closure that I feel like both of us really needed. Our paths ended up crossing in the most crazy ways during this time. I ended up healing the relationship with my mom. Her helping me out with this RV was really a changing point in our relationship. We had had some struggles in the past. And so during this time in Iowa, she had actually come out to visit me because I was stuck there. She lived in Wisconsin. That's where I'm from originally, and made the drive out. But she ended up not being able to find the place that I was staying. Her GPS kind of took her the wrong direction and in circles, and then her cell phone died. I actually thought that she had gotten in a car accident. I got the police involved. There was like missing persons reports on her. I literally had thought that my mom had been in an accident and had died on the way to see me. And so that was really traumatic. She did not. She was fine. We found each other and everything was okay. Even that event in itself forced me to really look at a situation in my life that had not been what I wanted it to be for most of my life, and really realize how important our parents are to us, and really realize how important it was to heal this relationship with her. Really had a lot of realizations on my part in things, because I think up to that point, I was really putting a lot of blame on other people. I was blaming circumstances. I was blaming other people's actions for why certain things had happened. And this was really the turning point in all of this for me. Mentally, I started to really look at my part in things. And from that point on, that lens of perception is how I look at life. That is how I look at every single thing that happens to me. And what I realized is that there is always a reason that things happen in your life. And we are the creator of our own experiences, both good and bad. And yes, there are things that happen that are completely out of our control. I mean, I just named so many things that happened to me that was completely out of my control. But every single thing that happened had a lesson attached to it. And it was like the universe was like, okay, are you seeing it now? And I was still just blinders on, right? I was like not seeing what I needed to see from the situations. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just can't see it until you're on the other side of it. And sometimes you can't see it until you're well on the other side of it. I finally get to the point where everything is in order to leave Iowa. And then I have this moment where I realize I have gotten myself into a bigger situation than what I'm prepared for. I had never towed an RV before. I had to drive from Iowa all the way back to California, which was like, I think something like 1,800 miles. Maybe it was more than that. But there were states that I had to cross, Texas, Kansas. I was going through these states that were extremely windy. It was, again, at a time of the year when the weather was changing and things were starting to get really cold. There was a lot of weather events that were happening. The day that I left that park, I had this moment, and I'm sitting in my truck and I've got the RV hooked up and I'm ready to go, and I've got my GPS ready. It was like I couldn't go. I was frozen with fear. I was like, what am I doing? What did I get myself into? This isn't safe. I don't know how to tow this huge thing. It's a 26-foot RV, but total in length, it was like 29, almost 30 feet. I'm just overwhelmed with fear. I'm white knuckle. Just like I have in a lot of other times in my life, I realize there's no going back. I'm here, and the only option that I have is to move forward. I can't stay in Iowa forever. I have animals back home. I have kids back home. I have to go. And so I went. Even that ride home that was supposed to be a 3-day trip back from Iowa turned into almost a week of traveling, because I got stopped by storms. I got stopped by wind storms. Every single time that I got stopped, there was a purpose. It was like I kept going and then I would get stopped. It was like, come on, I just want to get home. But every time I would stop, that downtime, I had some of the biggest insights. Really, it was this period of time where these insights changed who I was as a person. It changed how I looked at the world. It changed my view, changed the perception, the lens of how I look at my part in things. So it was all necessary and it was all part of my growth. And so every single frustration, every single stop that I had, every single event that happened was all for my highest and best good. And at the time, I couldn't see it. And you're going through that stuff and you're just trying to make it to the next day, and you feel like you're at your lowest of lows and what else could go wrong. It's really tough to look at things in that way, but it absolutely was for my highest and best good. Eventually, I get back to California. Thankfully, I had a friend who offered me a safe haven on her property. She had a space for me and my animals and my horses. And it was such a gift because I got to her property and thankfully was able to just exhale. I was in this very peaceful environment. I was surrounded by my friend and her mom, who I love to this day and adore. And I'm so thankful for that gift that she gave me of peace and safety and in this really serene environment where I could recover from a lot of things that happened. Although I was recovering, there were some really hard things that happened still during that time period. I'm still continuing on with the coaching at this point. Now I'm coaching people. I was just coaching my booty off. I had coached, I think, over 60 people. And what was really ironic about that was that even though I'm coaching all these people and having all these people have these insights, I'm still in this place of just feeling so lost. The only thing that I knew at this point was that I was meant to be a coach. And I found so much joy in helping people and guiding them to have insights and helping them on their journey. And so that was this beautiful thing that was happening throughout all this. But internally for me during this time, I was still depressed. I felt like I didn't know what comes next. I'm now trying to build this coaching business. I didn't feel like I knew anything anymore. I just felt like I was just kind of coasting along. Actually, on my birthday, my pity Grace, who was one of the main reasons that I ended up in the RV, had passed away, and it came pretty unexpectedly. She was actually an older dog, so she had a beautiful life. We rescued her when she was 11. She made it to 17, so we had 6 beautiful years together. During this time period of being at my friend's house and coaching, there was this little town called Brookings that kept coming up for me. And actually, it had come up in the past and I had ignored it. But for some reason, my heart was telling me to check out this little town called Brookings, and I couldn't figure it out. I went to Brookings for 2 months. I spent some time there. And after this 2-month period, I had decided that I was going to move there. We made plans. I made reservations. I had found a place for my horses when I came here. I found a place to stay in my RV. I was sure that this is what I wanted to do. After I get back home, because there was some loose ends that I had to wrap up, the plan was to come back in April and go home for the winter, back to Southern California to my friend's property. I go back and I'm tying up these loose ends and I'm carrying on with my coaching and I'm still trying to level up and doing all this training. And then I had a moment where I was just like, what am I doing? Why am I going to move from the comfort of this safe haven that I have from Southern California that I love to this place in Oregon that I've visited, well, twice now, and I don't know anybody, and I don't know why I'm going to go there. What am I doing? And so essentially what I did was I talked myself out of it. I convinced myself that this was not a wise move and that I needed to stay down there and that there was more opportunity down there and all these things, right? So ironically, or not, the universe was not going to allow me to change my mind. There were a few times where I tried to call and cancel the reservations for the place that I'd found to stay. And every time that I would try to make that call, either like something would happen as I'm dialing or right before, or like I would get another phone call right as it was about to start ringing. And so I never did cancel that reservation. And then also the horse pasture that I found, I tried to cancel that and the guy would not let me. He was like, you know what? Let's just keep it as an option until April. And when April comes, if you aren't coming, then I'll rent it out to somebody else. I had decided at this point, I'm not going to go, but okay, we'll just kind of keep these things out there as a possibility. So now we're right about winter time. And I ended up with COVID. I was the sickest I'd ever been. I mean, it was just like, it hit me hard. I was down with that for a while, but during this time period, there was also something that happened where I started to feel really alone. And then shortly after that, I was actually forced to leave my friend's property. And it was because somebody in the neighborhood had complained about RVs in the neighborhood. It wasn't just me. And there was an HOA there. There were people that were living in various places in this neighborhood in these RVs. And so somebody wasn't happy about that, had called the county. And so the county got involved and said, you can't be here anymore. You literally have 15 days to leave. Thankfully, I got a little bit of an extension on that. I was able to wrap up some things that needed to happen, and I did not have a way to get the horses up to Brookings. I did not have a horse trailer. Credit is shot. Now I'm trying to build this coaching business, but finances were still an issue. I literally said to the universe, if this is what I'm meant to do, then I needed to have a horse trailer. I ended up being able to, by some miracle, get a horse trailer. I ended up moving forward with going to Brookings. Now I'm in the preparation stage, end up coming up to Brookings first with my RV, and then the plan was to come back, go get the horses. And thankfully, my friend allowed me to keep them on her property for a bit. I drove the entire state of California up, and then I drove the entire state of California back down to go get the horses. I end up getting back down there. My heart horse, Sterling, who was the very first horse that I adopted, had some health stuff going on and he could not make the trip. And so I ended up having to make one of the hardest decisions ever. And I ended up having to let him go. That was heartbreaking to me. Get through this heartache of the Sterling situation. Obviously, it cost money to have the vet come out. And so that was impacting my finances. And so the day comes where I am now ready to take my two remaining horses up to Brookings. And I show up, I hook up the horse trailer, and I go over to start bringing the horses out to get them loaded in the trailer. And Destiny, my old girl, can barely walk. We got stuck down there for another 2.5 weeks. She couldn't walk. Thankfully, I had the most amazing vet that helped me with that situation. We were able to get her back to being sound again, being able to walk, but it took time. Every single day that passed that I was down there, and it ended up being another 2.5 weeks, I was staying in a hotel. So the finances are getting lower and lower. The vet bills are accumulating higher and higher. And it's not a cheap thing to go across an entire state. The gas at the time was like insanely expensive. So I was starting to really, really get worried about the money situation. So it was just like money was going out, going out, going out faster than it was coming in. And it was really starting to get scary. So get through all of that. We load up, we make the trip back, and I get into Brookings, I get my horses settled. And when I say I rolled into Brookings exhausted, that is like an understatement. I think what happened was my nervous system was so taxed from all of these heavy events and all of this stress that I had been through for the last year and a half leading up to this point that my body just physically could not take anymore. I ended up getting COVID. I was down for the count for like 2.5 weeks. Not only did I have COVID, I ended up getting pneumonia as well. I thought that when I had COVID back in December, that was like as sick as I had ever been. This was worse. I almost ended up in the hospital. I was really, 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 really sick. I get through that and recover, but mentally, I'm still just exhausted. I really, during this time, had set the intention of finding my happiness again. This was like my number one goal. This was like, okay, now I'm here. I still don't quite understand why I'm here in Brookings, but I'm here and I did it and I followed my heart universe. And so I'm trusting that there's a reason for that. Now, really, for the first time, starting to process all of this heavy stuff that I've been through. For those of you that don't know, I'm also a trauma-informed coach. What I know now was a trauma response of I had numbed out my emotions for most of my life in a lot of the really, really heavy events that have happened. And something happened where I realized that I couldn't hold all of this emotion in anymore. I started to allow myself to feel. And I also set the intention that I was going to come back to a place of love for myself. This was something that I didn't realize was causing me so much pain in my life. I had spent my entire life being love for others. I had spent my entire life loving the unloved, taking in these animals that didn't have a place to go or had been abandoned, loving people who other people had given up on. And I still do that to this day. And I will always continue to do that because that's who I am as a person. I also realized that I was sacrificing myself in the midst of a lot of this. And I was not being very loving to myself in a lot of ways. I was not giving myself what I needed. Instead, I was giving always to everybody else. And so I set the intention to change that. I think it was as a result of that, the floodgates opened. Emotions started flowing. I swear that I ended up crying for like 6 months straight. Not really, but there were times where I would just start crying for what seemed like no reason. And what I realize now is that it was my body releasing all of this energy. All of this energy that I had numbed was still present in my body. I could talk about all these hard things that I had been through. And this time period of life is just one section of hardship, you guys. I've been through a lot, but I could talk about these things rather emotionless. I would use those experiences to try to help other people. What I didn't realize until very recently is how present all of that energy was still in my body. And I also made a connection to health and the emotions during this time period, and how when you hold things in and you don't allow your emotions to be what they are in the moment and to feel what you're feeling in the moment, it really starts to affect your health in ways that you might not realize are connected. So I started just allowing myself to feel, and I stopped judging because there was this belief deep rooted in me that if I showed my emotion, or if I cried, or if I was anything but appearing to be happy on the surface, that that was weakness. Actually, it takes more strength to allow the emotions to be what they are and allow them without judgment and allow things to surface and process through, which is what we're supposed to do as humans. These emotions are not here to hurt us. They're here to help us. They're here to help us understand something, even the ones that we would consider to be negative: sadness, anger, frustration. All of those things are trying to help us understand something about something that we've just gone through, or maybe a certain way that we're thinking about things. And so when I started to look at it in that way, and I removed the judgment around feeling and allowing, and I released this need to control everything. The need to control comes from a trauma response, and I can trace that back to my very, very young days as a child. In my case, numbing out was actually causing me more harm than it was good, because it was keeping all of this energy, all of this sadness that I was carrying around for years and years in my heart. It was keeping it stuck there. There was some health things that were related to this energy that I had not allowed to process through. And so the next several months were all about that. It was all about allowing things to surface without judgment. It was just allowing things to process. Old things that I thought that I had dealt with that weren't present for me anymore were absolutely still present. Those things came up. And there was just this profound healing that took place throughout this time because I had made this decision to just let go and allow. And I really attribute the letting go and allowing to all of the hard things that I had been through up to this point, because what was so obvious to me was that all of these things were out of my control, but everything that happened had a purpose. And when I look back on it, every single thing that happened, the way that it happened, how it happened, the timing of it happening, it was all connected. Every single thing, every single hard thing, every single good thing, all of it had a purpose and it was connected, and it led me to exactly where I am today. I am the happiest that I've ever been in my entire life. And that to me is worth all of it. It's worth all of the hard things that I've gone through because I have come out the other side stronger, wiser, and happier, and truly happy. Like when I smile now, it is genuine. And when I help people, it's because it's coming from a place of love for me and for them. It's not just about other people anymore. It's about making the world a better place for everybody, and myself included in that. And I've really come to this place of love and acceptance. For me, my body is a big part of that. I was really, really hard on myself and my body image for a really long time, as I think a lot of us are. I've come to a place of just loving myself as I am. I am healthier than I've ever been, learning what I've learned about health, learning what I've learned about energy, learning what I've learned about coaching, learning what I've learned through my self development has brought me to this just beautiful place of understanding. And of course, we're on this journey. I still have so much more learning to do. I have more understanding and more wisdom to gain, of course, but I'm thankful for everything. And so if there's a message that I could give to anybody who's listening to this podcast, who's listening to my story, and also to the future stories to come, because I've got some really powerful ones coming up in future episodes, it's that you are absolutely the creator of your own life. And that when you are going through really, really challenging things in life, God, the universe, source, whatever name you have for that higher power, that higher being, absolutely has you tethered to a safety net, whether it feels like it or not. And if you look at all of the hard things that you've come through up to this point, you have made it through, and you will make it through the hard things that you're going through maybe now, or if there's hard things coming to you in the future. I want you to just really remember that. And also, belief is a powerful thing. You can't control the things that are happening to you, but you can absolutely control the way that you think about things. You can be really aware, and you can practice changing your story around the thoughts that come up and the stories that you tell yourselves and the meaning that you give to things. You can make it through whatever it is that you're going through. You have the power to change your story anytime that you want. There are the most magical things happening right now, and Brookings absolutely has a higher purpose for me. I truly believe that my dream of having a healing ranch, that this is where that's meant to be. Things are happening right now that are in the works of that. Using my horses in my coaching has been a dream of mine for a long time. That's in the works right now. Sometimes we can't understand the reason for things, but if we follow our heart, the universe will take you, God will take you exactly where you're meant to go. And so letting go of control, allowing things to be what they are, allowing those emotions to process through, helps your nervous system be able to get through these really hard times instead of holding it in. It can help your health, and it can bring you to a place of peace and happiness. And that is where I am now. I am thankful for you guys being on my journey with me. This is a continued journey. This podcast is something that has been a heart project of mine that I've wanted to put out for a long time. So moving forward, every Tuesday, there's going to be a new episode that's released of somebody that's telling a powerful story of something that they've gone through and coming out on the other side, whether it be in business or in life. Other people's stories can be so powerful because maybe we can connect to something that they said that we're going through. And my goal for this podcast is to give people hope, and it's to connect people together, and it's to let you know that you are not alone on this journey. It is to let you know that there's a community of people out there who love and care about you. There is good in the world, no matter how bleak things seem at the moment. I know that there's a lot of darkness out there, but there's so much light out there as well. There are so many good people out there. There's so many people full of love who want to help, who want to make a difference. I'm one of those people. The people that are going to be on this podcast are in that category as well. And my goal is to create a community of people who can come together and just really inspire and support each other. If you're on Facebook, I would love to have you join my Facebook group. It's called Empower 360. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening or watching it. New episodes come out every Tuesday. I just want you to know that you are enough, you matter, you are loved. And if I can make it through to the other side of all of this darkness into the light and being happy and experience such healing and growth, you also can do the same. Thank you so much for being with me today. I will see you on the next episode.